Welcome to episode 5 of Junk Filter, a new podcast about film, music, politics, and jokes. My name is Jesse Hawken, and my special guest for today is one of the hosts of Chapo Trap House. Joining me from Brooklyn, the one and only Matt Christman.
Hey.
Welcome to the show, Matt.
Thank you for having me.
I am one of you now.
Yes, you're a podcaster. You've joined the league. You've been beaten in. We took you out to the graveyard and everybody beat the shit out of you. Mark Maron dropped a photocopier on your head.
On the previous episode, we explored in great detail the Dudes Rock classic, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Defining film of the genre, in my opinion.
Yeah, the new height of the genre, but Dudes Rock cinema has been simmering in our culture for a while. We got a bunch of Dudes Rock classics last year, but I want to pay special attention to a Dudes Rock movie that I think got overlooked in the last couple of years, which also crosses over to the other great genre of American cinema lately, which is God Clint.
Yes, his amazing run of movies now in his 80th decade.
Yeah, he went on a huge run of these films that explore heroism, but in various shades of heroism and what happens to heroes in America.
Yeah.
But one of the strangest entries in this series was his 2018 experimental film, The 1517 to Paris.
Mm-hmm.
A recreation not only of the terror attack where 3 Americans stopped a terrorist on a train between Amsterdam and Paris, but he also, it's one of the riskiest films that I've seen in a while. Clint made this strange decision to cast the boys as themselves and to tell the story that led to that moment on the train, going all the way back to when they were children.
Yes. Yeah, it is. It's like it is experimental in that sense of it's a moment. It's trying to recreate that moment of the life flashing before your eyes in a moment of trauma. A lot of movies try to do that with the I guess you wonder how I got here, but that's just a cheap narrative gimmick to get you invested. This is a artistic attempt to sort of simulate that the clarity that comes in moments of great crisis, where you do what you do and you live or die depending on everything that came before. And so the film is about getting them to that point and contextualizing their actions as they're carrying them out.
But with a special focus in many ways on all the messing up. It's not an easy road to get there. Oh, no.
Well, that's the thing.
At some point, they're being propelled by destiny. But for the longest time, it looks like they're never going to get anywhere.
And I think that to me is part of, and watching this movie really snapped the last piece into the puzzle for me, understanding these movies that Clint's been making since, I think, 21st
It really started
century.
with American Sniper.
Yes, that's the first one, yeah, where he's been churning out these movies like one a year. He's got his own building, apparently, at the Warner lot, where he has complete autonomy, and he just gives the studio the script, says, we're shooting this, they cut him a check, and that's it. And as a result, the movie is very wildly in quality because he's riffing and he's letting us see the results of that riffing. And that was a thing that threw me off for a while. I didn't like a lot of these movies. And for example, I hate American Sniper. I still think American Sniper is a bad movie, but like just aesthetically, but forgetting the politics stuff. But it just seemed like he was so fixated on getting it shot. Like the fact that everything has the same flat look. I mean, that is largely a byproduct of the fact that he wants to move quickly. He wants to shoot quickly, which means he needs to light flatly and evenly, because that means he can do more setups in a day. And at a certain point, to me, it felt like he's just making movies to make them. But especially, I started to have second thoughts about that after I saw Richard Jewell, first of all, which was absolutely stunning to me and made me think, well, whoa, I think maybe I have not really been fully aware of what Clint's been trying to do. But then, like, looking back at some of them through that lens of Richard Jewell and then watching this afterwards, it really made me realize it's like what Clint is basically doing as the guy who embodied like American heroic masculinity on screen, you know, like the modern version, like the more civilized than John Wayne version, right, of American like masculine virtue. He is looking at the world around him and saying, and saying that sort of heroism that was the model that I embodied, and which is still the model that American men are pursuing because of their cultural surroundings, is essentially impossible. Like, modern life denies the capacity for that sort of heroism. And his movies are, to me, about what that means, how we respond to that, how that shapes us when we cannot be the heroes that we are taught to be, where the ends towards which our ideas of like all of our virtues as people, as men, cannot be expressed. And like, this movie is a lot about how these guys are essentially told over and over again throughout the course of their life to not be heroic, to not be the men that they instinctively want to be, or have been, or like are conditioned by culture to want to be. They're supposed to behave. They're supposed to be civilized. They're supposed to contribute in the 21st century knowledge economy, which denies all the values that they've been inculcated by an entire history of like Western culture to want to carry out.
One of the reasons why everyone knocks Clint is because of his conservative politics. But so many of these films, Sniper is actually maybe the most conservative of the run of his works. I mean, it's
the most explicitly like ideological, I would say.
Yeah. Whereas I found the patriotism sort of element in the 1517 to Paris to be acceptable to me. I didn't think that it was particularly jingoistic. There were moments where their American personas in Europe were sort of drawing a little bit of heat. And it ends with, their Legion of Honor ceremony where, they're sort of singled out for their American bravery. But I did think that it was a little bit more nuanced in terms of the portrayal of the American.
Yes.
You would expect Clint to sort of crank to 11.
Yeah. Well, and even with American Sniper, I mean, people have argued that movie is not as jingoistic as it sometimes appears because it does frame the heroism that Chris Kyle carries out as essentially pointless. Mm-hmm. Like, it is framed, and this is part of like why it's sort of curdled and reactionary is the way it's framed is essentially Iraq doesn't deserve American heroism. Iraq is not a country that is worthy of our heroic output, which, that's part and parcel with the fact that he is a 90-year-old cranky reactionary who literally ran for mayor of his rich seaside California town when the ADA required him to put a fucking ramp in his hotel. I mean, he's a conservative, but like the art part of his output is not being filtered through some ideological lens. It is a perceptive recognition of a fundamental contradiction within American culture. Because the thing about that heroism is, yes, like it's now coded culturally as reactionary and patriarchal and racist and violent, but that's because that has generally been the use that like that masculine drive towards heroism has been given by our government, by our economy. Like it has been exploited for oppressive ends. But now that we're like at the end of history and we don't need to conquer any more frontiers. We just need to be consumers, and we need to participate in this sort of fake knowledge economy to justify our paychecks. Then we need to all demobilize that masculinity. And the thing is, we do need to demobilize masculinity. And even Eastwood's embodiment of masculinity is a demobilized version of previous masculinities. I mean, Eastwood was sort of the synthetic mainstream version, of the more sensitive, more sort of self-aware masculine hero of the 70s. And then you got Charles Bronson as like the recondite Neanderthal slug that's like none of the charisma, none of the self-awareness, just like the brooding Neanderthal violence. So Eastwood was already a refinement away from like a pure unapologetic expression of male aggression, but he recognizes that now even that is now been coded as like inherently toxic. But the thing is that the drive towards heroism is not inherently toxic. It is funneled towards toxic ends by the culture that it finds itself in. And what we have now is a situation where instead of, we have called progress bottling male aggression, but just pathologizing it and pathologizing the desire to be useful, I would say, is how I would put it. More than anything, the desire to help, the desire to be useful. Richard Jewell is also very good about analyzing this, and American Sniper is too. Like, the good parts of American Sniper are about this: the drive towards feeling like you're helping. And in America, if you're a guy, especially a white guy, you've been taught and you've grown up understanding what that means to be a certain set of values and a masculine problem-solving approach that's, embodied by things like police officers and cowboys and stuff like that. And now all of those desires, those drives, which are wound up in all of like the civic desire to participate in a project, has now been pathologized. And if they're pathologized, what do? What are you supposed to do? And there really is no answer for that in like the broader cultural drift that says, no, this stuff's bad. You should feel bad for even wanting to do that, and you should learn to code instead. And that's where we are. And I think Eastwood, more than any contemporary director, is aware of that specific contradiction within our culture. And I think where these movies like go off, like American Sniper, is when he tries to get in any way more specific than that, because he's filtering through, I think, this fundamentally reactionary political point of view. But the art itself is speaking to something that is really true and resonant, and works like this and Richard Jewell are able to resonate that way, because the guy's making a movie a year. Some of them are going to be bad, some of them are going to be better, and when he gets the right content and with the right like when he can combine the content and the form in the right direction, it makes everything sing. Like that flat cinematography I talk about in Richard Jewell, that's perfect, because it evokes the world of offices and of credentials as it is, as like a soul bleaching experience of like coffin, living in a coffin, and that's aesthetically effective, and not just an easy way to get a lot of setups done in a day, which it also is.
Oh yeah, no, he's figured out a way of sort of aestheticizing the efficiency that he needs to work under.
Right.
In The Mule, for instance, he draws a very interesting distinction, or a very interesting parallel between the sort of drudgery, measurables-oriented worlds of both the cartels and the FBI.
Yeah.
They have to hit their measurables. They both have shitty and boring worlds.
Yes, everything, even criminality, and even the old like West categories of cowboys and Indians and cops and robbers has been fully bureaucratized and tamed.
And the Clint character in The Mule is having a great time when he isn't really on the clock. But then there's a shift over in the cartels, and it's like you have to be at X location by Y date. And you realize that, like, it's that sort of drudgery of sort of, performance reviews and things like that are actually probably more damaging to the American people than the drug trade is.
Oh, God. That's why people do drugs, for Christ's sake, is that they have to interact with this fucking system.
So I guess we should deal with the 1517 to Paris, which I guess I'll mention their names: Spencer Stone, Anthony Sadler, and Alec Skarlatos, but we'll probably be referring to them throughout the show as the boys.
Yes, our boys, our dudes.
I was blown away when the movie started, and it literally starts. Well, first they have a little moment of the terrorist boarding the train, but then we literally go to a shot of the boys driving down an empty road, and one of I guess Anthony Sadler literally says, "You're probably wondering why a brother like me is," it literally begins with, "Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I got in this situation."
Yep.
But he's like, you're wondering why a brother like me is hanging out with these two crackers. Well, we've been friends for a long time. And before I tell you what happens, let me take you back and show you how it all began. And then suddenly we're in an after-school special. And this is Clint's second after-school special movie, the first being Gran Torino.
Yes.
Which has a
absolutely.
major after-school special vibe to it. And the first 20 minutes of 1517 feels like a shitty 80s TV movie / after-school special. And bizarrely, the grown-ups in the movie are all populated with sitcom actors.
Yes. Pam
from The Office, Judy Greer, Thomas Lennon,
it's all it's
Tony Hale, and
yeah.
Urkel.
Yeah, it is a Nerf soy universe of literal cartoon, like genitalless cartoon figures bouncing around.
It's like, why are these overqualified? Like, why is Judy Greer mixed up in this thing? What is Urkel doing as their teacher?
Yeah, I think it's something about like how that's actually what's teaching. Those are actually what is raising children. You know,
it's television.
Television, and like the affected values inculcated by television are things that actually are training children, not any fucking school or lessons or teachers.
And the children are there's like 2 scenes where like the kids get busted for not having a hall pass.
Yep. Yeah,
in the first 10 minutes.
They're not following the rules. They're not harnessing their animal passions, their energy to the task of education. Why should they be educated? Because.
Yeah, and like the very first real scene in the movie is this really bizarre one of the few moments in 1517 where Clint's, reactionary politics are forefronted, where Judy Greer and Jenna Fisher go in to talk to the teacher, who immediately tells them that their kids suffer from ADD and tells them to get medicated, and also tells them that if they don't get medicated, statistically, single moms are more likely to raise kids with drug problems. So they're just going to medicate themselves if we don't medicate them. And Judy Greer turns around and says, "You're telling me I have to drug my child to make your job easier?" And then as she walks out, she says, "My God is bigger than your statistics."
Well, that is, yeah, I love that because that's gibberish.
I just sat down. The movie just started.
That's gibberish. But that makes sense. People in stressful situations will redound to gibberish. But that dynamic of, I mean, that is essentially the demand made of parents, is that we like, this is essentially the job of we have is to break your child. And and if they resist the breaking, then you need to let us intervene in them medically, because we only have so many like technologies of authority within the school. We need to be able to literally extend our authority outside the school. For one way to do that is homework, but if the buck and bronco bucks too much, and especially if they keep cutting funding, so you can't actually, you have a less and less active control of school time itself, because bigger class sizes and stuff, you have to fill the gap with something, and Ritalin is there to do that. It's there to fill the coercion gap in the job of conditioning these kids. And once again, for what end? So you can fucking work a copying machine. That's it. Yeah. So that you can be
docile
yourself. So you can sustain yourself in a system that where the best you can hope for is a moderately like a moderately comfortable standard of living, and beyond that, nothing. Any higher aspiration as a human being does not exist. It cannot be put into a market transaction. It does not mean anything. You aren't born into capital. You aren't born into a position where you can indulge yourself by finding like meaningful, passionate work that you care about. That's only for people who can afford to do things as hobbies, because stuff that's fun to do costs money. And so you are essentially being brought into awareness of the limitations of life, and then you're supposed to accept that. And
And
one of the
drugs
things
help you accept that.
exactly, the drugs help you accept that, and that's one of the things that's. I mean, this is why these movies, even if there's a reactionary blind spot in them, are still truthful, even as they have bad prescriptions and bad targets of the ire of the filmmaker or the storytelling. Is that, like a lot of people who are trapped in this situation and are frustrated, it blames these symptomatic expressions of this greater system rather than the generators of it. Like the underlying idea of a movie like Gran Torino or American Sniper or this movie is that the reason that we need these values that are being beaten out of our boys is because there are people that need to be fought. There are wolves that need to be defended, that need to be defeated, that need to be warded off from the sheep. But who those wolves are not who Eastwood thinks they are, is the thing. Because he is so caught up in the specific narrative of martial virtue that he's always going to find the enemy outside rather than within. Because with a different ideological gloss, any of one of these movies could end like an Upton Sinclair novel, with the characters realizing, the real enemy was this system, was this economic exploitative engine that is turning us all, regardless of our value system, into automatons.
Significantly, the boys meet in detention.
Yep.
That's how the three of them become pals.
Yep. Because they're rowdy. Because they love to roughhouse. Because they have animal energies that can't be contained within the school day.
There's this strange moment where the kids have a sort of moment of bonding over a handshake, where they're doing the teenage boy handshake, the sophisticated, hand moves or whatever. And the kid says, "I had no idea you guys could be that cool." There's not particularly cool, but that's the grounding moment.
Pretty cool.
So suddenly they're friends. And then there's this phenomenal scene. This is a key scene for me, is when the Anthony Sadler boy goes to visit Spencer at his house. And then Spencer goes into the bedroom with him and shows him his gun collection.
Yep.
Which reminded me a lot of the parallel scene later in Eastwood's career in Richard Jewell, where his lawyer comes and sees all the guns and the AK-47s that Jewell has. The idea that these kids are being indoctrinated at an incredibly young age to be weapons fetishists.
Yeah. Well, that's just it. Is that it's the conflicting messaging of childhood, of male childhood. Like everything you get in the ambient culture, the stuff, the things you watch, the games you play with your friends tells you to be one way, and then at the exact same time, you're being acculturated into a school and social milieu that tells you to do the opposite, the exact opposite.
Also, Spencer Stone has on his wall a movie poster for Full Metal Jacket. Why? Yeah. Why would a kid? I'm assuming this is supposed to be like the year 2000 or something.
Yeah,
they don't really
around that.
Yeah, sort of around that. But for maybe the early 2000s, I'm assuming that they were in their 20s in 2015. What's going on with Full Metal Jacket? I was trying to figure it out.
I think that it's have you ever? Did you see Jarhead?
No,
okay.
I didn't.
I read the book, and actually, I might not even have read the book. I read an excerpt, and Swofford the author talks about how before the night before he went off with his friends to join the Marines, they watched Apocalypse Now, and Full Metal Jacket, and Platoon to psych themselves up, because there is, as Godard, I think Truffaut or Godard said, there is no such thing as an anti-war movie, because war is fun to watch, and the rituals of violent conflict are viscerally arousing to like a budding American male, and all of the stuff, all the Kubrick detachment and irony, they are not digested by a young hungry eye. What is the violence and the aesthetic splendor of it, and the coolness, because that's the thing about Full Metal Jacket, is that the characters are incredibly cool. I mean, people talk about the second half and how it's not as good as the first, and I like the second half. And one of the things that's striking about it is how they like those the GIs in the second half of Full Metal Jacket are models for hip, cool, under fire badasses. Like way better than any of the fucking post Whedon soy based guys that you see in movies nowadays. Like, oh, they can fly now. They fly now.
Yeah.
Like Animal Mother and 8-Ball and those guys, like they were doing hard bants. And so even when they weren't shooting people, they were evoking like a male camaraderie that was incredibly appealing and unrestrained by the sort of cultural superego structuring that they're getting in school.
But the other thing that I was thinking, because I was, trying to understand why a 10-year-old in the year 2000 would have a Full Metal Jacket poster in his bedroom. And I was wondering whether or not it was Clint. When you think of two major filmmakers and Warner Brothers, you think of Stanley Kubrick and Clint Eastwood. There are people that, for the most part, their entire careers and their most important work was with Warner's. So I was wondering whether or not Clint was making some sly industry joke by having that be there. Or
it meant that they needed a war movie poster and they could get the rights to that one because it's the same studio. And it's just like when he got when the baby got sick in American Sniper, they said, "Fuck it, get the doll."
I love that moment. I could not believe what I was seeing.
Oh God, that to me, I was just my jaw. What you could just watch his thumb.
Yeah,
his thumb was moving the arm, and it's like this amazing that they.
That just shows you that Clint doesn't really give a shit.
Yep, absolutely.
In Hereafter, there's a moment where the kid totally blows his line and says it over again, and Clint's like, "Print."
Yeah. I don't want to die in the middle of this goddamn movie.
So, okay, and now, we have to also deal with the fact that Urkel shows up as their teacher. And Urkel...
I think that means something. He's literally... The guy hasn't been in a show in 20 years. He hasn't been in any job. I've not seen him in a film. I don't know where the hell Barnes & Noble they pulled him out of to be in this. He is literally, for a generation of people who grew up in the 90s, the definition of the castrated nerd. The all-brain, no-balls, sort of half-man. And he is there trying to teach these kids how to be adults.
But Urkel is, I think Urkel's only in the movie for like 45 seconds.
Yeah.
But he carries the sort of linchpin moment. He's in one of the last scenes where the kids are still kids, and he's the one who tells the whole class about FDR having to make a split decision, and what would you do if you had to make a split decision? It's like, okay, Urkel.
Yeah.
And then the bell rings and he's like, don't forget the test tomorrow and remember to read the book. It's like, have you ever seen a movie where the teacher didn't... There's like every single movie with a teacher has the scene where the bell rings and the teacher says, remember the test tomorrow. I was like, holy cow, Clint, you're really phoning this one in.
Yep.
After one more flashback of the terror attack, we move right on to the real action, which is the boys grown up. And this is where I really started to get on board with the movie, was the Jamba Juice scene. Can we talk about the Jamba Juice scene?
Speak on it.
With chubby Spencer Stone working behind the counter, and there's like fake Jamaican reggae playing. And there's a recruitment truck across the street, and this Marine walks in and tells Spencer, while Spencer's making a smoothie, about the Air Force Pararescue Service and what a noble profession that is. And based on this one conversation, Spencer decides to join the Air Force.
Yep. Well, because he's in Jamba Juice. It fucking sucks. It's terrible. Anyone who's ever had a retail job in food service, especially, it's fucking soul destroying.
Yeah.
And it's as good as you're gonna get, because he wasn't good at school. He failed the tests that they put out for him, literally. The behavioral and cognitive tests to have any kind of like long-term hope for a happy life, however you want to define that, is predicated on passing these tests that he didn't pass. And so it's Jamba Juice or an equivalent position for the rest of your life, realistically. Whereas you could join the fucking military and maybe do something useful.
Then we go to Spencer and Anthony sitting in this underlit room with wood paneling, watching the game, having like banal small talk about the game and drinking beer. And Anthony says to Spencer that you're going to need to lose some weight if you want to be in the military. But like, where does Spencer like, whose house is this? It looks like a hotel room. Does Spencer live in a hotel? But it's like this beige and drab room. And this is what I want to really single out with Clint, is that like, he's like one of the only American filmmakers who is actually chronicling the beige banality of the United States.
100%. I would say it's him. Also, Mike Judge. Have you ever seen Extract?
I haven't.
So,
No.
like, obviously, Office Space got the workplace banality very well, but the movie Extract, it gets exurban, like living. A lot of the scenes take place in a big, very bland McMansion and in chain eateries like TGI Fridays places, and they just vibrate with they make your soul die just looking at the screen. Clint is also able to do that by just lighting everything flatly and showing you everything, showing you the Cromwellian warts.
But it's incredibly honest depiction of the United States. Like, to me, it's like, this is what, when you miss your plane, when you miss your connecting flight, you get sent to a weird Holiday Inn a few miles away from the airport into this shitty hotel that they hold for people who miss their planes. This happened to me. And you're just in this drab and depressing environment that is just a revolving door of people who got screwed over coming in and out. And if I went into that room today, it would look exactly the same as it did 5 years ago. But Clint seems to be someone who wants to actually explore that visually.
Yep. Like what it actually looks, and that is, I think you kind of at a certain point, you got to be an old motherfucker who puts out a movie a year, because you're sacrificing key aesthetic components of movie viewing. And honestly, this has been a thing that turned me off of the later Clint movies and made me reluctant to catch them and made me look them in a jaundiced eye, is that they do look ugly.
Yeah.
But, when he's got the right subjects, when it's all wrapped around a theme, the ugliness is aesthetically resonant.
Yeah, like one of the ugliest looking movies that I've ever seen was $1 Million Baby. Like, all the color was bleached right out of it.
I'm not a fan of that one, honestly.
No, I don't like it either.
I don't like that one, and I don't like Sully.
I didn't like Mystic River either.
Yeah, I haven't watched that in a while. I like the book. I'm a Lahane fan, but the movie isn't great. And also Sully. Sully doesn't work. And American Sniper, it's honestly, more than anything, it's the lack of squibs. I'm sorry, I could forgive all kinds of jingoism and Iraq War revisionism, but you do not put digital fucking gunshots in your movie, Clint Eastwood. How dare you? How dare you? How dare the man with no name make a movie with a bunch of CGI video game blood spurts?
Yeah, I automatically dock any action movie points if they're not going to show blood squibs. It's like, that is not...
And of course, Eastwood, that's not negotiable, because you know how long it takes to set up a squib shot compared to somebody just falling over and you adding it in post?
Yeah. From this scene with Spencer deciding to join the Air Force and being told that he has to lose weight is this insane training montage where we see Spencer getting back into shape. When I was watching the movie, I was like, you know what? Fuck Raging Bull. Spencer Stone was so committed to playing the part of himself that he put on 30 pounds to play the younger Jamba Juice loser version of himself for 2 scenes, and then lost it and got back in shape in the training montage.
King.
For a non-actor to be playing himself and to go back in time to the Lardy version of himself and to take it all off for a movie about himself, that's commitment.
Absolutely, yeah. Give him credit. I mean, that's because he wasn't somebody's kid, which is the case of almost all actors now. He was a freaking jarhead, and he was excited about the opportunity, and he was going to do a good job.
To play yourself and to go back in time to play the fat version of yourself for 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Good for you, Spencer Stone.
Absolutely. We stand a king.
And so, I'm just getting more and more into this movie as it's going, and then another moment where my head exploded was the large adult son stuff, where now the children with their sitcom parents are grown-ups, but the sitcom parents haven't aged. So Judy Greer is now acting opposite Spencer Stone.
Yep, that's hilarious.
And Spencer's so mad because he devoted a year of his life to getting in shape, but he discovers that he has depth perception problems. So he actually did it all for nothing, as far as he's concerned, and has to go join a different branch of the military. And he's like freaking out on Judy Greer. Why have the ladies not aged at all, but their little boys are now large adult sons? So then there's this other incredible scene where Spencer Stone's in some like basic training, and I guess it's like a rescue sort of squad that he's being trained for.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden in this banal sort of classroom, they suddenly go into lockdown and they get told that there's an active shooter.
Yeah.
Spencer, unlike all the other soldiers in training, goes over to the door with a ballpoint pen ready to go for whoever's going to come in. And then suddenly this tension just resolves itself. The all clear sounds off, and then a man walks into the room and tells, I guess, the audience, guys, this is a false alarm. Everything's fine.
Yep.
Thank you.
And the teacher, this is key, the teacher yelled at him for trying to prepare himself.
Yeah.
Because we're all told, as part of our deconditioning away from like being masculinely aggressive, you in any kind of situation where violence might be called for, it's not to be done by you. You're not an authorized purveyor of violence. You have to sit and wait and hope you don't get killed. That's your job. Your job is to essentially be livestock, and that chafes people. They don't. Who wants to be told that they do not have a say in like their own ability to protect themselves if danger comes?
And this is the moment with the most Clint Eastwoodian dialogue, because the dialogue's not particularly memorable, although I remember it because it's just so aggressively banal, almost everything that everyone says. But the instructor says, what were you going to do with that ballpoint pen? And Spencer says, well, ma'am, I didn't want my family to find out that I was found dead hiding under a desk.
Yep. I don't want to just get slaughtered.
Pure Clint Eastwood mentality.
But the thing is that it's also who would? There's something perverse about the assumption that no, that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to follow the rules, even though the rules are also the things that is why there might be a fucking shooter in your school. Even though the rules are why the horrible things happen, you're supposed to trust it to protect you, and you're supposed to cede your own ability to protect yourself and the people you love.
I always had a conspiracy theory about fire drills at school, that they were about training you to be obedient more than anything.
Yep, exactly. That's it. It's like a cow, like how cows are. It's like Temple Grandin teaching the beef companies how to calm the cows down as they go through the chute.
Yeah, because like what they want to do is sort of insert the fear of this happening at any time into your head subconsciously.
Yep. So and then you can cleave to the authority figures and let them fix it.
One thing that I found very interesting about this film was Clint's fascination with technology and people using technology. Like there's all this sort of, on their trip to Europe, they're talking about Instagram all the time, and they've got their selfie sticks and they're taking selfies of each other. But the part that mesmerized me was when Spencer, who's stationed in Portugal or in the Azores, is arranging with the boys for their trip together to Europe. So Spencer calls Anthony, and Clint shows the entire experience of a Skype phone call, and like from a conversation on the call to the end of the call to him making another call. And it was like, what is going on? It's like Clint is making this documentary about new technology, like he was fascinated by it. And I realized that no younger filmmaker would at all care about the process of like a Skype
take it
call.
For granted.
Whereas Clint is mesmerized, I think, by this technology and wanted to sort of capture the experience of a Skype call.
Yeah, and
maybe he was trying to demystify technology for his elderly audience.
Well, I think also just showing how it sucks. Like, I think he goes through this stuff and he pays attention to things that a lot of people who are younger have taken for granted and assimilated, which is the alienating, soul-deadening aspect of trying to negotiate society largely through technology instead of through personal interaction.
Mm-hmm. Did you see Polanski's Bitter Moon?
I have not.
You should. It's incredible. It's got a God mode performance by Peter Coyote. So I'll just tell you that throughout Bitter Moon, he devotes all this screen time in the movie to the French Minitel system. Do you remember Minitel?
No.
It was a internet phone computer tech that existed in France in the 90s. It was like pre-internet, very, very low tech. But there's about 10 minutes in the whole run of Bitter Moon that documents like the process of making a Minitel phone call and what seeing these cheap graphics coming up on the screen. And it makes the movie very culturally significant now because it captures a now vanished communication system. It's this really tedious process. Like if you had to call 911, you had to get on Minitel and log in and let the screen fill out. It's like valuable time vanishing. And so I for some reason I thought of Bitter Moon while I was watching Spencer Stone making Skype phone calls. And, in 10 years, I have no idea how we're going to be communicating with each other. But I also feel that 1517 has accidentally documented this technology. And I was sure that no younger filmmaker would care. But Clint, for some reason, felt that
I think it's because he doesn't take it for granted. Because he's not absorbed it. Like, oh yeah, that's what you do. You make phone calls with the internet. He's like, what? What are you talking about? If I want to call somebody, I get on the goddamn rotary phone and I say, hey, I'm coming over in 15 minutes. What is this? What is it? How about you write somebody a goddamn letter? What the fuck? God, yeah, okay. But Obama, what do you make of this garbage here?
You guys just want to skip Paris?
Or at least delay it a little bit.
I'm starving.
Maybe it's like you're saying, like life's kind of catapulting you towards something.
So right now it's catapulting me towards some hangover food.
What'd you say?
I don't know, man. It was something I said in Venice. I was caught up in that European high, I'm not gonna lie.
Nah. You should have heard this guy. He was talking about how life is catapulting him towards something like some greater purpose or something like that.
Spencer said that?
I know, deep right.
You still think that?
I mean, I guess, but nothing's actually stopping us. If we weren't meant to be on the train tomorrow, something would physically stop us. An object in motion stays in motion unless acted upon by a greater force.
Okay, Isaac Newton.
I'm telling you, man, he's been deep as hell on this trip. I can't even deal with it.
The thing that I was so blown away by the 1517 in Paris was when they finally went on their big European vacation. I was stunned that the movie, which by the way, nothing has happened in this movie for like an hour at this point. Nothing has happened.
Yeah, nope. They're just wandering around.
But even before that, like, all the Spencer Stone messing up in his training, we barely even see the other two guys. Like, one of them gets sent off to Afghanistan for a tour of duty, and it's like 2 minutes in the entire movie, and it seems to be all about a scene where he forgets to put his bag in the Humvee. It's like, what is going on here? Like, there's nothing going on in this movie. And then it suddenly turns into a travelogue with Spencer Stone and Anthony Sadler at the Fountain of Trevi and walking around the Roman Colosseum and saying incredibly stupid things like going up to the Vatican and Spencer says, that must be where the Pope lives. Or, this is it, baby, the Trevi Fountain. With Volare, a jazz version of Volare playing. It's like, what am I looking at here? To quote Lex G.
Yeah, I think it's, once again, it's the banality of what you're supposed to want. Like, oh, you're going to Paris, you're going to Europe. Like, that's the part of the benefit of living a cosmopolitan American existence. And it's just some fucking stuff. It's like you have no connection to it. It's just something to see because you're supposed to see it.
Have you ever gone on a big sojourn in Europe, like ridden the Eurail Pass and gone all over the place, like as a younger man? Did you ever do anything like that?
I've been to Europe. I never did. I have never done. I've taken a train in Europe, but never. I didn't do like the Europass thing. I've been on a train from Brussels. I've been on a train from Amsterdam to Berlin on the continent, and I was on a train in Spain, and I went from Brussels to Paris, but like never the whole internal thing, like the hostel thing,
I did, and I got mistaken for an American a lot when I was traveling. Nobody assumed that I was a Canadian, which was very bizarre. I mean, Canadians are mystery figures in the world anyway.
Well, there's not a lot of them.
It might be as simple as that they just figure if you're like some dude who talks in a sort of bland English voice that you're an American.
Yep.
But I was surprised that the only time that I felt Canadian was when I was in Amsterdam, because they love Canadians there.
I can imagine why.
We saved their ass.
I think it's because they are inundated with Anglophone tourists because everyone speaks English, and it's right across the strait from England. And American and British tourists are two of the single vilest groups of people on Earth. And so Canadians are probably just a fresh burst of Arctic air compared to the fetid, disgusting, COVID-heavy sputter of some disgusting, ham-faced, red, shaven-head British scumbag or an American college douchebag demanding mushrooms from a fucking 7-Eleven.
Just this fucking EasyJet landing on the tarmac and all these disgusting Brits who each paid like £30 to like destroy a country every weekend.
Monsters. Meanwhile, Canadians just show up and are like, oh, hello, hi. Oh, I'd like some, maybe, would I like some marijuana, please?
Thank God that we have marijuana here. When is New York going to get its act together?
Never. Not going to happen. Not going to happen. And I tell you this, if it happens, maybe within 5 years, it will be, you'll have to get it at the DMV. It'll be like, there will be state dispensaries that will have the bureaucratic layering of the Department of Motor Vehicles. That will be legal weed in New York if it happens in 5 or 10 years. I will predict that.
There was this period when they announced that they were going to be legalizing weed that was kind of like the Wild Wild West. All of a sudden, all these illegal dispensaries opened up in Toronto. And one of the funniest ones was actually 2 blocks away from my house. It was this store that was called Hats Shop. And they had pictures of hats on the front, and they had, if you go into the store, they had all these hats for sale. But if you went up to the counter and said, I want to buy some weed, they would take you into the back room where all the weed was. So they had this fake storefront called Hats Shop. They were shut down by the cops. But it was so incredible. Like, I love the idea of that sort of speakeasy lifestyle where, you know, you go to a flower shop and then they let you in through the fridge at the back and it takes you to the bar. I was really excited about Toronto doing that kind of weird fake storefront mentality, operating in this sort of legal gray area. But when it became legal, it became super boring.
Yeah, it always will. It'll get, anything interesting gets drained of all of its romance and excitement as soon as it can just be purchased over a counter.
I want to talk to you about the scene in the film that blew my mind, which was what I call the Gelato Scene. What did you think of the moment in the 1517 to Paris where there is this unbroken 1-minute sequence that shows you from the beginning to the end the process of ordering a gelato?
I thought brilliant, because once again, he is settling on something that people who are younger and more assimilated into this new paradigm take for granted, which is the public ritual and protocol of consumption, which makes up our experiences. You go to Europe, you go to Italy to eat gelato. That's one of the things you're doing there. Yeah, you're looking at things, but what are you actually doing? The thing you're doing, what are you spending money on? You're having dinner, you're eating a pizza or pie or something, and you're sampling the local stuff. And what does that mean? It means the same thing. It's the exoticized and it's the consumer outward version of the Jamba Juice. Mm-hmm. It's the other side of the interaction, like
the better version of the Jamba Juice,
right? But that's the illusion. Like the illusion of capitalism in America is like, you do enough Jamba Juice work, you can make it so that you can go to Europe and get a gelato. It's the same fucking thing.
Yeah,
it's the exact same thing. You are sacrificing yourself to this machinery and alienating your life to have this experience, the experience of which is identical to going into a fucking Jamba Juice.
And I guess a parallel too, where everything that America does, Europe does better. Like the gelato is going and getting a gelato. I mean, it probably isn't like a living hell for the person working at the gelato place in Venice as it would be to be working in a Jamba Juice in Scottsdale, Arizona.
Well, that's because the United States is the most like capitally developed country. It's where all like cultural bonds have been completely dissolved. So like the gelato is embedded in like a culture that predated capitalism, which the United States doesn't have. But what capitalism does give you is the opportunity to go and sample that culture in the form of a consumptive experience. You can have a culture, but you literally have to pay for it. Culture has been bleached out of your life. You have to make money in order to experience it essentially vicariously through consumption.
You know, we have to bear in mind that this is Clint Eastwood. He directed Unforgiven and he directed $1 Million Baby. And now he's making this strange film where he shows you these guys ordering gelato. Mm-hmm. It's like, what am I watching here? Was what am I looking at here needle was going into the red during that scene. It was like, I am sitting in this room, I'm watching Clint being fascinated with the process of ordering ice cream. What am I looking at?
I think you're looking at what we're getting instead of heroism, what we're getting instead of Dirty Harry facing down a bad guy, what we're getting instead of self-actualization through imposition of will on the world. We're getting gelato.
After the scene is the scene where the other big sort of moment where the film's thesis is plainly stated, where Spencer Stone, who lights up a cigarette, all of a sudden he's smoking. After, whipping his body back into shape to join the Air Force, he's up on the roof having a cigarette, which is, what you're supposed to do when you're in Europe. And he asks, do you ever feel like life is just pushing us towards something like a greater purpose? Like lines that belong in the trailer more than they do in the movie. But it was just this beautiful contemplative moment with Clint and the boys on the rooftop at sunset. It was just like, Clint just wants to bask in the beauty of the everyday or something like that. He's an 87-year-old man with this movie that is trying to have this weird affinity with millennials. Like he wants to hang out with the kids.
Well, he's trying to show that he gets that what their specific crisis is. He gets what their dilemma is.
But he's also trying to, I think, in this movie, he wants the millennials to be heroes, unlike most millennials. Like, I would assume that Clint has a low opinion of young people in general.
I think probably, but it's more that he has he sees most young people as people who have essentially been broken, like they don't have the capacity more than that they're choosing it. Obviously he's probably colicky and just, get off my lawn. And yeah, he does want to contrast this with what he thinks is like a generalized younger person. But the whole movie is about the forces that put people in that position where they aren't useful, where they aren't able to rise to the occasion. And then by contrasting them with the people, with the few who can and are. And I think that, like, even if that might be disdainful, I think because of its understanding of the forces at play, it's still in an odd way sympathetic to that outcome. It understands that outcome is not a choice necessarily, that it is a stream pulling you in a direction.
Were you blown away by the club scene in Amsterdam?
Always, I love it. I love the idea of Clint in the club.
Yeah, it was Clint and Spencer with the honeys and the bartender throwing bottles around. It's supposed to be in Amsterdam. I was actually a little disappointed. I read that they filmed that scene in Atlanta. It felt like a trashy European club.
Yeah. Well, because they're very depressing and like weirdly lit, this means they're perfect for a Eastwood version.
I assume that Clint is not really the guy in charge of like the music cues and things like that, because there was this like.
I'm assuming he lets other people take care of
funky
that,
beats.
Yeah.
This brings us finally when the boys are all together in Europe. They get on the train, and now we're into the actual third act, the moment we've been waiting for after 70 minutes of nothing happening. Were you impressed by that sequence? Like all of a sudden, the movie just ramps up.
Yeah.
After tons of setup, is
Yeah.
the actual payoff.
Yeah, and I think that's to make, and that's what makes it pop, is that you have established what life is like, what the pattern of life is like, what the degree of stress and split-second decision-making required of a day-to-day existence is, which is not very little, which explains why people get just stunned by violence when it does outbreak, because they're not ready for it. And this emphasizes the way that we are just not acculturated to deal with that kind of thing. It just doesn't happen in our day-to-day life.
They wound up filming that scene on an actual high-speed train, I found out. They had the option of doing it on a set with visual effects, but they decided to actually do it on the actual train line, and with no control over it, over the schedule of the overall network of trains. But it's a very effective sequence. There's a kineticism that goes along with the action that is provided by the environment. Did you also know that the guy who got shot in the scene, there was like a tourist who got shot, is the real guy? He got shot on the train. He reenacted his own shooting.
Yeah. Yes, I did read that. That's amazing.
They wound up not only getting the boys to play themselves in the movie, but they got the people who were on the train, as many of them as they could, to play themselves as well.
Yeah.
It was like a more sort of a more therapeutic version of the act of killing was one of the things that I was thinking of. It was like, instead of getting these guys to relive the horrors that they inflicted on people, we're going to get these people to reenact this horrible traumatic event.
I think that the casting of the actual people is, it's the reason to make the movie, honestly. If you put anybody else in these roles, this movie is pointless. And it pays off because the fact that they're not good actors grounds everything and makes it real. Like, yeah, they don't sound like they probably sounded in these moments, but they sound like they would sound like if they were trying to reenact them.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, they are not actors; they are authentic people. And Eastwood's one of his theses here is that the space for even imagining yourself to be a hero is gone. Those archetypes are now kind of culturally taboo. They've been soyified. Frankly, they've been weedified. And the only chance to have that kind of experience of heroism is real life.
Once this sequence is over, is this insane ending with French Prime Minister François Hollande making his feature film debut. I know that they used body doubles, but Clint decides to end the movie where the Legion of Honor ceremony takes place, intercutting between the actual footage of the ceremony and recreations with Pam and Judy Greer attending the ceremony, and the last words spoken in the film are François Hollande. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, this is the first film about a French Legion of Honor ceremony directed by a winner of the French Legion of Honor, because Clint got that award from Sarkozy a few years before that.
Oh, that's cool.
What did you think of the movie in general? Were you pleased?
Yeah, I was really happy. I mean, it like I said, it made the whole corpus of his work post 2000 make sense to me in a way it hadn't really before. And it makes you want to go back and rewatch all of them, honestly. And even Sully, which is obviously not very good. But
No.
But yeah, no, I would put it up. I think it's one of his more successful efforts because it's one of the things where his specific aesthetic, which is shaped by his personality and at this point his age, meshes with the subject matter and his specific approach, like the basic gimmick of having them play themselves, into a coherent artistic expression, which is more than you can say for most movies that are made, even by auteurs at this point.
The last wide-release experimental film from a major studio that I can recall was Freddy Got Fingered.
Yeah.
I haven't seen anything
basically
this
doesn't
experimental
happen.
since that.
Honestly, yeah. Like, when you think of what the expectation of a film is, certainly the expectation of a Clint Eastwood film was. And then what he did with this.
And Warner's is in a position, I guess, with Clint that they have to indulge him. Clint's like, I want to make a movie about the boys. They're like,
Yep.
Okay, Clint.
That is honestly, that's where his autonomy is what allows us to get the gems, even if there's some clunkers, because you're getting as close to the unfiltered mana as possible. There's few suits in the sieve as you could get.
I think that sometimes people who really hold Clint's conservative politics against him, despite the movies not being as simplistic as that, is it all boils down, I think, to the 2012 GOP appearance, right? Like that's what really makes people mad about Clint.
Yeah.
Like I think a lot of libs felt very betrayed by that moment.
Well,
Like
I mean, they hate it whenever any talented Hollywood person that they love becomes conservative. Like if they don't like them, if they're like when Scott Baio is conservative, they don't get mad. They're delighted.
No.
There's somebody with actual talent and real fame is a conservative. It drives them crazy because it just short circuits their understanding that arts are for sensitive people who believe the right smart things, the right good things. And if you're good at the arts, it means you're a good person because I'm a good person because I consume the art.
Yeah.
And then when they see somebody who has a different opinions, it's like, oh God, what? Maybe this entire thing is bullshit. Maybe this is completely arbitrary, and it's just me flattering myself.
I think that sort of perception of Clint as being a doddering, crank. The films don't really have that feeling of a doddering old man who doesn't know what he's doing at all.
No, well, that's the thing is that he's at the end of the day, he's an artist. And the real argument for why these people shouldn't necessarily be politically active is that that's not what they're good at.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they would do. Like people are going to have political opinions, obviously, it's normal, but having political opinions, contrary to, I think, the way people now have assimilated political opinions, thanks to the internet and like the way that we're all cultivating social media presences online, and like that's part of it. Having political opinions is not actually a skill. It's not actually an art form. It's not actually anything with content. And therefore expressing them is not some sort of artistic expression. And so if someone is an artist, it does not mean that they're going to be able to articulate their artistic impressions through a coherent political lens, because they don't think politically, and they shouldn't. That's not their job.
No. For celebs, it's like almost worse when they open their mouths than when they
always
stay
worse.
quiet.
Remember when Clooney won the Oscar?
Yeah.
And he talked about, or it might have been a Golden Globe. And he talked about how Hollywood was always like on the forefront of all justice efforts. Yeah. And how like basically if gay marriage and racial equality are thanks to show folk. Yeah. And it's like, I want to shoot you with an RPG. What you think you're doing? You think you're helping? You're not helping. I mean, Eastwood talking to that chair did not help Mitt Romney. And these these smug liberals are not helping their cause either.
No.
Like what is a good liberal or even left celebrity endorsement or comment? That's not a thing.
No, I can't even think of one off the top of my head. I'd have to go lie down for a few minutes and get back to you.
Yeah. I mean, it's not worth getting mad about. That's the thing. Celebrity political opinions are only worth maybe rolling your eyes at. It's not worth getting mad about either direction. And but it's also not worth defending.
No.
It's people who have decided, because our culture is becoming politicized and they are cultural figures, that means that the content of their work and their day-to-day lives and their self-conceptions are going to be more and more politically inflected. And I think that's bad for art, honestly.
Don't you find it interesting, this sort of change in the last dozen years or so? I'm thinking about, how when Bush was the president, everyone was like, you know what I love about the West Wing? It's like the America that he's the president that I wish we had.
Yep.
And since we don't have the president I wish we had, I'm just going to care more about this TV show.
Yep.
Than about the actual world.
It's a fantasy retreat. Yeah, it's a retreat to a magical land where everything works out.
But there was no sort of like widespread revulsion for feeling that way in the 2000s. But
oh no, it was assumed to be.
Yeah, but I mean, like you weren't like laughed out of the room for talking like that in the 2000s. But I was very delighted in this election when the West Wing was like, all right, we're going to have our reunion special and it's time for America to get together and vote or whatever. And so many people were like mocking it and and just there was like so much open contempt culturally for that kind of liberal sort of do-gooder kind of attitude. Like people used to not be ashamed of saying something like that. Now I think people would be a little bit more cautious about sort of getting really excited, openly about a West Wing reunion. It just feels like
remember when it came
something
out?
has changed in the culture.
Yeah, people are. It's what it is it's not, and this is the real problem for anybody who thinks like it's a positive development. It's not that there's any real developed political consciousness that has rejected the West Wing. It's that it's embarrassing. It's that it's cringy because it's too. It's not. It's politics. It's affect of optimism. That's what's no longer allowed in the post-Trump era. That the hell world, doom scroll world. It's too. It's not sustainably. Its optimism is no longer sustainable. Like before Obama, and then of course when Obama was president, it was like a vindication of the West Wing, and then Obama administration, the people within it, self-consciously operated as though they were in the West Wing. But then Trump just brought down the curtain on that. And now I don't think anybody, even liberals, except for the most self-deluded ones, the ones who are like riding a Hitachi all the way to Inauguration Day, have realized that it's unseemly. It's not cool to be that dewy-eyed. And that's where we are with
there was
stuff.
that tweet from a couple of days ago about that woman getting so excited for the big orgasm that she's going to have with all the news about all the Biden appointees.
She is going to nut all over the place. She's very excited about it.
But you used to be able to say something like that and have people go, God, she's saying exactly what I'm feeling. Whereas now you say something like that and you become a gigantic joke amongst people on your side of the political equation.
Yep.
Which I find, a promising development. It's like, it's good now that you can't be that cringe and get away with it. Like you have to, like, I'm surprised she hasn't deleted the tweet because it was like 80-20 against.
Yeah.
Like she did not get rewarded for saying anything like that. She was made fun of.
This must be remembered though, is that after Bernie and the Bernie Bros were created as a psychic enemy, as a bête noire for the internet, as a component of online political disputation. Getting yelled at and getting made fun of became part of the performance of political engagement and pleasure. That orgasm she's getting isn't just from imagining the inaugural, it's from getting yelled at by Bernie Bros.
Right.
That's all part. It's all part and parcel. It's all one sick jumble of libidinal enjoyment. So even the negative impact now is only encouraging the remaining freaks who are totally wired into this to even get more publicly perverse.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way, but you're not wrong.
Yeah. That's the thing. It's like everybody on here, the thing to remember about anybody on the internet talking about politics is that they are having a good time. They're having they can talk about how they called the cops because of trolls and they're hiding in their closet. They're having a good time.
Yeah.
And
they're like pain pigs.
The tormenting is part of a narrative in which they're gaining joy out of it. And so it's all just a sick abattoir. Bunch of pervs. every time I see people talk about politics, and even if they're not talking about riding the Sibian while watching Biden say the oath of
Biden's
office,
Secretary of State pick.
Yeah, they are. I am pussy popping for Tony Blinken. If they're not doing that, they're still getting off. They're still little sick worms getting off.
Thank you so much, Matt, for joining me on this show. And would you be my guest again sometime?
Absolutely.
Do you have any immediate future plans you want to tell anybody about?
Just being on Chapo Trap House, my podcast. Check it out if you haven't.
Is there a Dudes Rock film that you could recommend?
Yes. Midnight Run. Martin Brest.
Yeah, you guys just saw that, right?
Rewatched that. I just rewatched that recently. I've seen it before, obviously, but I hadn't watched it in a while. And wow, That puppy sings.
With Charles Grodin, my hero.
Grodin, one of a great De Niro performance, like
Yes.
where he was actually funny but not trying to be funny.
And the god Yaphet Kotto as well.
Wonderful. So many. Oh my God, Farina. Philip Baker Hall. John Ashton as Oafish. Bounty hunter Marvin Dorfler.
Just a dream cast.
Yeah, a bunch of just high tea kings.
Okay, Matt, thank you so much for joining me on the show, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Absolutely.
Well, that's a wrap for today's show. Please join us again next time. We'll have episode 6 in the next few days. If you liked what you heard today, we do have a few previous episodes, so you might want to catch up on those. And if you like what you heard and would like access to future bonus episodes, please sign up to our Patreon, which you can find the link to at our Twitter account, which is JunkFilterPod. The music for this program was provided by Marker Starling. My name is Jesse Hawken.